Hello, I'm Carolyn, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hello, Carolyn.
It took me a long time to get to the point that I believed I was an alcoholic, despite lots of evidence. I came into the program when I was really young. I was 18. I was a senior in high school, freshly expelled from high school, and in a girls' treatment center. And I'll get there. Anyway, so I'm from Chicago, Illinois, and I love Chicago. It's a great place, great food, great people. My family, not so great. My family, very abusive, lots of physical violence and emotional neglect, and just the perfect recipe for an alcoholic, right? And it happens to run in my family too, which, skipped a generation, but my uncles, my cousins, my aunts, all alcoholics. Fortunately, they're all in recovery. They're all old timers, so I'm the baby. But so alcoholism was something that I didn't really have in my household, but I had in my blood. My dad, I have never seen him drink, ever. My mom, I've seen drunk once last weekend at a concert, which was crazy. But other than that, she'd have like a couple of glasses of wine and that would be it. So, I grew up like thinking that I was relatively normal, right? Like anyone else, normal family, or so I thought, because when you have abuse in your family, you don't know that that's not normal. Well, I was really depressed, like really, really young. From as long ago as I can remember, I was very, very depressed. And it just got worse over time. But I was a really good kid. When I got to high school and my friends started drinking and using, I had like a sober buddy, and we had like a sober alliance that if we went to a party and there was alcohol, we would like bail each other out, or at least be there as like a comrade in sobriety. And so I was like a goody two shoes. Like when I'd go to parties and they would have beer pong, my friends would put orange juice in my cups because I didn't want to drink beer. I was sober, and that was like a really important thing to me. My friends really respected that about me. They thought that was just great, and they didn't want to corrupt me. So, for a really long time, I was very, very decidedly sober. But the thing is, my depression got much, much, much worse. And it got to the point where I was suicidal, and I just couldn't live with myself. I hated life. I hated myself. I was miserable. And I decided to, fix that. I was with my friends one night, and I had a little pouch in my bag that I kept pills and just like Benadryl and Sudafed and like Tylenol from the medicine cabinet. And for months I had been adding a little bit to my pouch day by day so that no one would notice. But I ended up having like over 50 of these pills. And so my friends and I went to this house, and I was planning on, taking all of them in the bathroom. And my friend was mixing drinks, and he made some rum and cokes for everyone. And for the first time, I was like, yeah, I want a drink. I'm about to die. I might as well have my first drink. So I did. I had a rum and coke. And then I went to the bathroom and I took all the pills. But I regretted it. As soon as I started to feel the effects, I told my friends, and they rushed me to the hospital where I had to drink charcoal. And I blacked out for, 20 or so hours. And then when I came to, they took me to the psych hospital. So I survived that attempt, but after that, I didn't want to be alive, but I also didn't want to die. So I was like in this limbo where, I still couldn't live with myself, but I had like a lot of apathy towards the world, and I didn't care about anything more. And I didn't really, have any way of coping with all of this pain that was left over in me because I'm still depressed. So drinking was a great solution to that because I didn't have to think about my problems or feel anything anymore. I started hanging out with different friends that did use and drink. And I would be sneaking out of my house every night to go drink and use with them in their garage. And, that led to like a decline in school performance, ditching class constantly, coming to school loaded. And not long into my drinking career, I did get expelled. And because it had been like less than a year, I didn't think that meant I was an alcoholic. It just meant that I got cut off really short into the spree, and that wasn't very fair to me. So I got sent to treatment and sobered up there. But what was really fortunate about my treatment is that it was in Manchester Center, Vermont, which is one town away from Dorset, Vermont, which is where Bill Wilson grew up. And my first meetings were at the Bill Wilson house. It was really cool. They have paintings and pictures everywhere. It's part meeting hall, part museum, part bed and breakfast. He's buried right across the street. It's amazing. And the thing is that I wasn't going there because I wanted to be sober. I was going there because they had free popcorn and dogs. Yeah. So that was my motivation. I would sit in the back and I wouldn't hear anything. But the longer I went, the more I did start to pick up on some of what they were saying. And I'd think, wow, I actually relate to these people who are 2 or 3 times my age and are balding men. And I started hearing things that sounded just like me, but I wasn't an alcoholic because I just related to their emotions, right? I didn't have anything that had nothing to do with my drinking. But I did start sitting closer and closer to the front of the meeting until I was in the front row, and I was sharing and thinking this is great. I love this. I love being sober. My family likes me again and they trust me again and everything's coming together. This is great. And I did stay sober for a while. I got out of treatment. I went to 2 treatments before I got out, and I did rack up a little over a year just coasting without a sponsor, without doing the steps, just kind of coasting until I started dating a guy that was an addict, and it pretty much ruined my sobriety, as you can imagine. So I had my first relapse, and relapse is a huge part of my story, and I think I've had 3 or 4 relapses, and part of that, actually most of that, was just the denial that I wasn't an alcoholic, that I was too young to be an alcoholic, that I didn't drink as much as other people. I had justifications and I had ways around seeing it, I would hang out with people who were way worse off than me, which made me look not that bad, right? I had a boyfriend later on who had cirrhosis, and that made me look really good. And so years of this went by where I'd get a year and I'd think, I proved everyone that I can be sober. So now I can graduate. And then I'd relapse. And every time I relapsed, it got worse and worse and worse. One thing that I found out along the way, not related to relapse, is that I have schizoaffective disorder, which for me is a combination of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And I would have psychotic episodes on and off. And originally, that was just organic. That was just something that happened on its own. But later on, they became substance-induced. And I had the insanity. I had that alcoholic insanity telling myself, psychosis is the worst thing I can imagine. I would do anything to stay out of psychosis. I never want to go psychotic again. I will literally do anything but that. I will not stop drinking, but I will do everything else to stay out of it. But you know what causes it? Drinking. So that ended up being this catalyst in why I could not break this cycle of getting sober, relapsing, going into psychosis, going to the hospital, getting sober, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it just kept getting worse. One of my relapses, I was living with cirrhosis guy, and we partied ourselves into an eviction. We lived with our friend for 1 month and partied so hard that after 1 month we were all evicted. And I had nowhere to go. He moved back in with his mom, but I didn't have anywhere to go. So I started just living out of my backpack, hopping from couch to couch, thinking, well, I still have drinks and I have, weed, and I can get loaded. So this isn't so bad, right? Not recognizing that literally not having an address is a problem. So long as I could get loaded, it didn't matter. Everything was fine. But it was not fine because, I did go back into psychosis, and this time it was the worst episode I'd ever had. And it resulted in, I got married. I married this guy that I didn't really know because it seemed like a good idea when I was psychotic. But actually, in my mind, he was a god, right? And so I was marrying God. He was saving my soul from demons. So that's a great reason to get married, right? It's not. And I came out of my episode and I was like, oh, dear God, I am married. I married a stranger. What on earth did I just do? And I actually got an annulment. So they absolved my marriage, and legally it never happened. And that was a huge wake-up call to me that I couldn't control myself. And the consequences of my drinking were so great that I would do just unimaginable things that were out of my character that I would never normally do, really wild things, right? So that was, I guess, very humbling. But I got sober, and I stayed sober for a year about that time, and that's when I met John. John was all about recovery, and I was getting to that 1 year mark where I wanted to graduate. So I was not super into that, and he really liked me, and I was kind of like, whoa there, buddy. So I wouldn't date him initially, and when I did start dating him, I relapsed and lied about it for a few months, and part of what motivated me was just breaking his heart and thinking that I couldn't go through this cycle again, and just finally recognizing for the first time that this pattern wasn't going to break itself, and I was in trouble. And I looked down the road at the rest of my life and I was like, this is horrible. Like, I can't go on living like this. This is like, I'm getting too old for this. And I was 27. And I just looked at my future and realized it was terrifying and that I needed to stop. So I finally got honest for the first time in my life and realized I do have a disease. I am an alcoholic. This is a real problem that I've been running from for like 10 years, 7, 8, 9 years at that point. And it was it wasn't like a low bottom in the sense that I was evicted again and, marrying strangers, but I did realize that emotionally I was not okay, and it was an emotional bottom. So that was 5 years ago, and hopefully that was the last one. Yay! And I would love to say that my life got better when I got sober this time, but it absolutely did not. Oh God, it was awful. Like, my whole first 2 years were like some of the worst years of my life, and I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. Are you serious? Like, everything, they tell me that I'm going to get better. They have these promises that tell me it's going to get better, and my life is worse. This sucks. Everybody kept dying in my life. Like, my friend died within my first 30 days, and that was very hard. I feel like in your first 30 days especially, you don't know how to deal with that. And then my grandpa died at 5 months, and then my dog died like 3 weeks before I got my 1 year. And it was like, you have got to be kidding me. What is going on? And, I did go into psychosis again, and getting sober wasn't enough to stop it. So I ended up being in the hospital like 3 times my first year. It just was one thing after the other. I was suicidal again for the first time since my attempt. And I was so depressed, and I was just hanging on for dear life to get through that first year. And so when I got to the end of that first year, I felt like collapsing at the end of a marathon. It was very challenging. There was a pandemic, which no one could have seen coming. We all know that. So I was faced with all of these challenges right out the gate that I felt like were some cosmic joke. But looking back on it, I realized that all the other times I got sober, I was always on the pink cloud, and everything came together and my life got better. And I didn't utilize that. I didn't pick up any tools along the way. And when I needed them, I didn't have any. And it was a disservice to me because it suited my laissez-faire lifestyle to have this really easygoing sobriety. But this time, it being the worst couple of years of my life, were a blessing, honestly, that I really needed, because I'm so, dense, that I needed it like bashed into my head by my higher power to get this. Like, there was no other way for me, because I realized that the only thing worse than everything going on was a relapse. And that was a big motivation for me, was just recognizing that I couldn't make it any worse, and that relapse would be the one thing that would just ruin it all. So I kept hanging on, and people would tell me like, oh, you're right where you need to be. I hated that. I hated that so much. But you know what? The sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly is absolutely true. It was slowly for me, but it did get better. In my second year, I found out that I had more mental health conditions. And so my recovery became this like all-encompassed thing, whereas before it was going to meetings, doing the step, having sponsees. And my second year it became, having a routine and taking care of yourself and trying to go to the gym and like applying all of this into the rest of your life, which is when I realized that recovery is like a lifestyle. Like, it's not just the practice of doing the thing. It's like, and I say that it's like going spiritually vegan. Because when you go vegan, you consciously make every meal vegan. Like, you choose to cut out meat and dairy from every meal. And you do that every day, like 3 times a day. And so with my recovery, I'm making a conscious effort every day to cut out alcohol. And that's, to me, like being spiritually vegan. It's applied in every area of my life. It's everything behind closed doors. It's how I interact with my fiance. It's how I treat myself. Like, it's everything. So it's gotten a lot better. One thing that was really huge for me was finally getting spirituality into my life, because for the first 3 or so years, I couldn't figure that out. It says in the big book that with spirituality, you just need to be willing. And I had the willingness, and I was actively trying to seek anything, but I couldn't figure it out. I was like intellectualizing it and trying to overthink, like, what is this connection supposed to be like? When will I feel it? How will I know? And I was getting nowhere. And people would tell me, this is my spirituality, and you should pray this, and you should do this. And none of it worked for me. And I was just like bashing my head into a wall until I let go of that. And I stopped trying to figure it out. And then one day, about 18 months ago, John and I were walking along at Skagit Valley College, having a conversation about his spirituality. And out of nowhere, I got struck by lightning. And in a minute, in a moment, I had this complete revelation where everything shifted in me and went 180. And my life has been completely different ever since. I've been happy every single day since then. And I was never happy before. And I love myself, which I didn't before. And the thing is that in that moment, when I had that shift, I had a realization to myself that for me, my spirituality looks like this. The less I know, the better. The more I question and intellectualize and overthink, I don't get anywhere. But when I stop trying to look for answers, the answers come to me. And so I realized that it's actually a little bit presumptuous that me, a mortal, would go to my higher power and demand more knowledge than I'm given. I think that's just silly. And so, I realized that I don't need to question everything. I don't need to ask for answers, because whatever knowledge I need, I've already been given. And if I need any more, I'll be given it when I'm ready and I need it. So until then, I just have faith that I have everything I need already in me, and I don't need any more until I get there. And I feel like I don't future trip as much as I used to. And if I do, I can reel it back in more easily, because I don't really feel like there's much to worry about anymore. Like, if I think, oh man, there's this surgery in a couple of weeks, well, what good does it do for me to think about it now? Why don't I just think about it the day before the surgery? And that's when I can worry. I don't have to bother worrying about things in the future because they don't affect me right now. So there were all these aspects of that like lightning bolt moment that shifted me, and I think differently now. Like I don't think about death as much. Like I used to think about death constantly, and I don't think about it really at all anymore because I'm like, you know what, I'm not there yet. And unless I get hit by a bus, I really don't, have to worry about it. So my life has gotten a lot better since then. And it's something that I've realized can be like ongoing, but I do have to put in work. Like I've been having trouble with my serenity lately. And it's one of those things where I realized when I was praying the other day, when is the last time you prayed before this? And I couldn't remember. And that was kind of eye-opening because I used to be better about that. And it's something that I need to work on. And another thing is I started slacking on my fourth step, as one does. And I realized that I needed to be more in contact with my sponsor. And when I'm not working on that, like I usually talk to her every day. And when I go like a week without talking to her, that's an area that I should be concerned about because that is not like me. And that's a little bit scary. And I don't want to slip. And it's the lifestyle. It's something that I apply every day, like every meal, So I've been working on that. I've also had a couple of other spiritual experiences since that initial one. And that's wild to me because I thought that was a one and done deal. I thought you had your first one and then boom, you're spiritual. It turns out that you can have them in many different ways. That first one I think was kind of subtle because after that I just got excited and went on with my day. And it wasn't like I was, really emotional or anything, but the other two were really profound, and I was crying like crazy, like crying like a baby, and it was amazing. And it felt like nothing I can describe because it's not a feeling I'd ever had before, but it was very extreme, and I felt really like overtaken by the spirit, and it was amazing. And I didn't realize that things like that could happen to people, but I've been able to kind of find experiences like that or have growth and development that unlocks that. So my spirituality today is coming along. I feel like it's still in the infancy stage, but I've got something today which I didn't have for the first few years, and that's been really incredible. So this program has really saved my life. It's restored my relationships miraculously where they had been completely burned bridges before. I have a healthy relationship for the first time in my life. And that's wild to me because I didn't even think I was capable of finding love. I just thought that was never something for me. And not only do I have someone I love, we work on our relationship and we've been together 5 years now. And that's incredible. I never thought I'd be with anyone like longer than a few months. Another thing that really I have a lot of gratitude for is when I made amends to people, it profoundly changed our relationships. And it's kind of like brought people back into my life that I didn't like think I'd ever earn back. Like I'd hurt them so badly, I never thought they'd ever want to talk to me again. But like my stepdad, when I made amends to him, it completely repaired our relationship. And now once a month I go see him in Oak Harbor and we have a sleepover. I come over, we eat Taco Bell, we do projects, watch a movie, make dinner. And then I crash at his place and we go to Costco the next day. I wouldn't have that without sobriety. I wouldn't have happiness or peace. And I wouldn't have community, which is the biggest thing for me is community. I was so isolated before, whether I wanted to be or not. And I desperately needed human interaction and had none. So being a part of a community of people that look out for each other and follow each other on their path and hold each other up and also like hold each other accountable. Like that is something I can't live without. So I'm grateful for this program. It's a miracle how it works. I wouldn't have my life any other way. I'm really grateful. I'm grateful to be here. Thanks for my sobriety. Thanks.